Yeah, good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome to web development with HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. Um, this webinar is from Edureka. Yeah, I am your presenter of this webinar today. My name is Srinivaslu Saya. I am the instructor for this front web development with HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript course. Yeah, see, the objective of this webinar is you need to understand the importance of web development, and also you have to appreciate the differences between a web designer and a web developer. And you might be hearing about web development, but the web development has got two parts: front-end web development and back-end web development. At the end of this webinar, you will be able to differentiate what is front-end development and what is back-end development. And then we'll briefly have an overview of HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Then we'll look at JavaScript framework, jQuery and AngularJS. And then I'll briefly touch upon what are the different topics in advanced web development. So if time permits, I'll give a few demos in between. Let me check. Yeah. So let's look at what is the importance of web development. As you already know, internet is ubiquitous now. Internet is accessible through mobile phones, through desktops, and even the handheld devices like your tablets. The main purpose of the internet nowadays is that you should be able to reach to your users and customers. Okay, but who will do it for you? And so you need to build the reputation of your organization. So your customers should have should build the trust in your organization, and you need to find a way to improve reputation of your company. And you need a salesman who can do this round the clock. That salesman is your website. Note that when you talk about a website, basically if anyone nowadays, let's say, introduces you that I'm from so XYZ company, then the first thing you would do is go to the Google, the search for that company name, and go to their website, company's website, and then see what that company does, who are all there in the management team, whether there are any job openings for you, what the company is about, what are their products and services, and so on. So since that, see, the customer could be your potential employee, or it could be someone who can buy your product and services. So whoever visits your site, they should get the best impression of your business. And the purpose of your website should suit the needs of your target audience. When I said audience, it could be your potential employee or your potential the client or customer. Note that if your website is user friendly, it's professionally looking, and so it has got the information what the visitor is expecting from your website, and then that improves your reputation of your company. And also, if the site is good, it is easily navigable, then that reflects on the reputation and expertise of the company as well. Note that after internet has become widespread throughout the world, and the business can come from any part of the world. And recently, I read in the news that any businessman in India, if they host it on their product or product on Amazon.in, they'll be able to sell to probably 100 in 160 different countries. Note that sitting in one a small town in India, you can sell in 160 different countries. So you don't know in the global world, your business can come from any part of the world. and ultimately the website uh, of the company should basically call to action from the visitor. What it means is, the visitor of your website should actually become a potential an employee of your company if the person is good and he is looking for a job, or if the person should buy your product or service. So that's what I mean, call to action. Note that to do this, you need some salesman who can do the job round the clock, 24 by 7. So that salesman is nothing but the website of your company. To develop a website, what you need is web development skills. And so, see, to develop a website, you need basically two two people. One is the person who designs the website, that's called web designer, web, and another person who actually implements the website. So that's a web developer. So let's look at what is the distinction between these two roles. Web designer basically designs the look and feel of your website. Note that when I say look and feel, it's basically the creative side of the website. The what should be there, what should be the color, what should be the font size, where it should be placed in the website, and so on. And generally, the web designer creates a visual mockup of a website in a tool like Adobe Photoshop, or it could be Adobe Illustrator or any other tools. Note that a web designer rarely does the development of the website. When I say development, implementing that website using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Generally, web designers are, since they are creative people, you can call them quote unquote right brain people. They're um, the creative people. Let's come to the web developer. Note that if you just design a website, so that's not good enough. Ultimately, it should go live, and for that, you need a web developer. Developer, you can think consider as someone who brings the website to life on the internet. So a a developer does the development of the website so that you can host it on a web server, and so that it's accessible to the wide variety of users across the world. So for web developer need to have these web development skills. That's HTML. When I say HTML, I mean the current version, like older version of HTML is HTML 4.01. The current latest version is HTML version 5. And CSS, older version is 2.1, and new version is HTML CSS version 3, and JavaScript. So note that HTML, CSS, JavaScript are the three the skills, programming skills required for front-end web development. For back-end web development, you need scripting languages like PHP, Perl, Python, Java, Ruby, and nowadays if you host it on a Node.js web server, then you can do programming in JavaScript as well. So generally, the web developers are the programmers. They're the logical people, and you can call them quote unquote left brain people. So to gain the see, to become a web developer, you need to gain the web development skills. Let's look at what are the skills required for a web developer and web designer. So you can see the left hand side, the white portion of this rectangle is the web developer skills, and the right hand side, the black one, that is web designer. You can see the web developer needs languages like Ruby, AngularJS, HTML, CSS, PHP, Python, and so on. Whereas web designer needs skills in using the tools like Photoshop, Illustrator, typography, InDesign, prints, and so on. Note that web developer does generally the coding of the website, whereas web designer does the design of the website. So I said web development involves two sides, that is front-end web development and back-end web development. I said front end involves HTML, CSS, JavaScript. HTML defines basically the structure or the components of a web page, whereas CSS you need CSS styling for to make that components defined in HTML, um, basically the look and feel of those components. Those components should be visually pleasing to the visitor. Whereas the JavaScript, using JavaScript, you do the programming to enable the interactivity on this web page. Note that to improve the productivity, programmer productivity, a web developer might use any of the basically the frameworks for CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. Note that even though web developer uses frameworks, ultimately all these frameworks will be based on any of these HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The backend development, basically the purpose of the backend development is so that you can create a web page dynamically, and then serve it to the front end web browser, which is basically visited used by the user. When we said when dynamically creating the content, what it means is basically the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This mostly generally CSS and JavaScript more or less remain same, but whereas the what elements of HTML to be displayed to the end user is what differs from user to user. A good example of a dynamic web page is like Google. Like for example, I search for one query HTML, and another user on the internet searches for CSS, another user searches for JavaScript. Note that um, the the results which I get and the results other users who search for CSS and JavaScript they get as the results by searching on the Google will be different. Note that each user should be presented with a different HTML page, whereas CSS and JavaScript will remain same for all these three users. So that is what are the elements that need to be served to the different users is what is dynamically you create by writing the scripts in the backend scripting programming language, backend scripting languages like PHP, Perl, Python, and so on. Note that the purpose of any the backend web server used to send HTML, CSS, JavaScript code to the web browser. Ultimately, it gets rendered in the browser, and there's a human user sitting on the other side looking at your website. Note that the backend development can be done using any of these programming languages, as I mentioned, Java, JavaScript, Perl, PHP, Python, and Ruby as well. The main purpose of backend development is to achieve fast response times to the end users. Means you should be able to generate these dynamic HTML pages as quickly as possible so that you can send it to the user of your website. The focus of this today's webinar is front-end web development. Let's look at what are the roles played by HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can just look at the pictures which are given on the right side of this slide. HTML can be compared to the human skeleton. Basically, the skeleton defines the structure of the human body. Similarly, HTML basically defines the structure of a web page. Note that if you just have a skeleton, that's not good enough. You need to have muscles to move those different limbs of the human skeleton. So muscles are the ones which actually gives the movement to the human body. Similarly, and JavaScript does the similar thing for a web page. It gives the interactivity, the movement in the web page. Basically, it adds dynamism on the web page, and you can even dynamically update the content of a web page using JavaScript. And finally, note that just having muscles is not good enough. You need to be able to present the human body in a presentable manner. So that means you need to have a good dress, nice tie and shoes, and well, you need to present yourself well. So that job is done by the CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheet. CSS, in using the CSS, basically each element which is defined in the HTML, that is hypertext markup language. So each of those elements you can basically style them differently so that the whole web page looks good. Let's look at a brief origin of what is the HTML is. And so in HTML, H stands for hypertext. Hypertext basically means it's a basically text which has got references to other text. That's what is hyper. Hyper means it is well and over and beyond the normal text. So that's why it is hypertext. The hypertext concept was first introduced by a person by name Vannevar Bush in 1945. So the picture of Vannevar Bush is on the right side. Let's look at what a simple HTML5 page looks like. As you can see here, you the first line, if you see doc type HTML, then you can say it's a HTML5 page. Then it has got two main elements, head element and the body element, and each element is basically marked up with that tag name. So note that whole HTML document is enclosed between HTML start tag and HTML end tag. So let's look at, I just copied this code and here. So I just commented out some portion of the text because that I require a little later for the demo. So this is the title, and then you have here a paragraph which is welcome to HTML5, somewhat similar to this. Let me render it. If I render it, so this is the message what you see. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Next slide. Yeah, so see, until now we talked about web development and website, and let's briefly understand what a website is. Website is nothing but just it has got one or more HTML pages which will be served by a web server. Normally, if you don't ask for any, if you don't specify any file name, when you visit a domain name or website, so default page that will be served will be index.html or index.php. Note that so this page, index.html or index.php, will be served by a web server. Your web server could be HTTP daemon or Nginx or in Microsoft Internet Information Server, or it could be even an application server as well, like Apache Tomcat and IBM WebSphere. Note that generally HTTP web servers will serve the static content, little bit of dynamic content if you have done scripting in PHP like scripting language. But whereas web server on the web servers, you can write basically the code, the backend code in a programming language like Java. So you can write the code in Java and you can develop, you can basically produce in a .war file, and that war file you can deploy it on Apache Tomcat or IBM WebSphere. So that the purpose of that your JavaScript code that should produce an output which is actually the HTML element to be displayed in the web page and CSS and JavaScript that is required for that website. Note that for hosting a website, you will be using different technologies: HTML, HTTP, TCP/IP protocols, and you can host the website on any operating system like Linux, Windows, or Macintosh. So let's have a look at what HTML page is. HTML page basically it's a user interface for the web, or you can say when I said web, it could be a website or it could be web application. And note that HTML page is human readable. It's a text format. So this is how your this is what is your HTML page is. For now, just focus on ignore the text which is in the green color, and rest of the text is the HTML code. It's human readable. So this HTML page gets transported from web server to the web browser on a protocol called HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTP runs on top of TCP/IP stack. So generally, the static pages will have extensions like .html, and if it is a dynamic page, dynamic script which is run on the backend server, it will have the appropriate extension .php to indicate PHP's code, and ASP to indicate it's a ASP code. Let's look at what is CSS. As I said, CSS describes look look of the page, and also you can do formatting of the page. So CSS you can apply on languages like HTML, XML, and SVG as well. Basically, the purpose of CSS is to separate the content which you define in HTML from the presentation. So using CSS, you can style different properties of the elements like layout, the font, that is typography, colors, the background, and there's something called box properties like border, margin, padding, and you can style even the lists and tables as well. So yeah, see CSS as basically you need to have what is called style selector. The style selector could be a tag name like h1 p, a label, or it could be the value of an element's attribute like value of id attribute or class attribute. Okay, and yeah, yeah, let's and it basically the CSS, using CSS you can style the elements which are there in the document tree. The CSS basically has got a very simple syntax wherein you had to have the a selector followed by declaration block. Within the declaration block, you have to define properties and the values. So so these are the some of the CSS style properties. Let me demonstrate this. Yeah, here you can see. So I have got the different items, item 1 to item 9, and all of them, if you don't give any style, let me show it to you by commenting style. Note that when you don't have any style, then the whole content is just displayed as black color text. Now you would like to style this text and as well as this bulleted list, so that you can use the CSS style declarations like this. So whatever you can see here in between the style tag, this is a style tag start, this style tag end. So these are different style declarations. Here I given that different styles. Like for example, here using this style, I wanted the odd number of odd element, odd list items should be magenta. The even elements should be in the green color. Yeah. So you see, the odd ones are shown in the magenta color, and the even ones are in the green color. If you want to change it from green to blue, you can see now all the even items are in the blue color. So just by changing the properties, you can change the color. Yeah, let's move on to the next slide. So these are some of the CSS three selectors and the CSS three styles. Let's look at how we can do some transformations using CSS3. CSS3 has got a property called transform. Using this transform property, you can do translation of element along x-axis and y-axis, and you can rotate it, you can scale it, and you can do the skew as well. So here I'm defining a transform. This paragraph element, which is this welcome to HTML5 CSS3 and JavaScript text. So this text I would like to translate 200 pixels along horizontal direction and 100 pixels in the vertical direction down. So let me remove this transform and then show it to you how it looks. So note that this is the default position of the element. But as soon as you add back the transform, now you observe that this element moves. So that is 100 elements, 100 pixels horizontal direction and 50 pixels down. So you can just say at not 50, 10 pixels. If you want to make it 100 pixels down, you see now it went 100 pixels down. So if you want to do rotate, you can do here rotate, rotate by let's say 30 degrees. I'm refreshing it. You see the element got rotated by 30 degrees. And if you just give like minus value minus 30 degrees, it does in the reverse direction. Yeah, let's move on to the next slide. So CSS3 has got another property called transition. Using transition, basically you can get the animation on some properties of the element. In this slide, I given the transition property. I would like to do the transition on width property. So let me show the demo of the demo. So here I'm defining a transition on the width property, and I want the transition to happen over a period of 5 seconds. So on this paragraph element, when I do hover, so basically I would like to width to change from 400 pixels to 700 pixels. Since I defined transition both on the starting state and also in the hover state, so basically you will see the transition in the forward direction and also in the reverse direction. So let me remove this rotate, and so let me comment it out for the time being. So that is the default. Observe that I am moving the cursor on top of this, the blue rectangle. You see the width of this element is increased, and when I move the cursor out of this box, you see now it goes back. So that's what the transition is. Note that here I have done the transition only in one property, that's the width, and there are a few other animatable properties on which you can specify the transition, and the browser will do the animation of the element for you. Let's look at what JavaScript is. I'll just briefly go to the history of JavaScript. Initially, the JavaScript started as a language by name Mocha. Later, it was renamed as LiveScript, and again later it was renamed as JavaScript. Note that the JavaScript is based on a standard called ECMAScript 5. Version 5.1. ECMA stands for European Computer Manufacturer Association. Initially, the origins of this JavaScript, which is a LiveScript, it was developed by Netscape in the early days of web. And JavaScript actually is a dynamically typed language, and you need a JavaScript engine um, to execute this JavaScript language. And one of the popular the JavaScript engine on Google Chrome is called V8 engine. On uh, Mozilla Firefox, it's called SpiderMonkey. Yeah, the same ECMAScript implement or JavaScript implementation by Microsoft is called JScript. For security reasons, using JavaScript, you cannot do the reading and writing of the files from the client machine. You cannot write to the a file on the server, or you cannot close the window open by another website, and also you cannot read content from another website. Like for example, if you have the Microsoft site and IBM site, and Microsoft site, the JavaScript code which is there in the Microsoft site cannot read the content on the IBM site, and vice versa. So one of the important concept of in web programming is called DOM. DOM stands for Document Object Model. Note that yeah, every element what we see in a web browser is actually represented by a DOM element. So using DOM and JavaScript, you get basically a dynamic HTML. So using JavaScript manipulation on the DOM elements, you can change an HTML element, you can change its an element's attribute, you can change its style, you can remove it, you can add a new element, and if there's an event on that element, you can react to it, or you can create associated new callback function for an event, and so on. So there have been different DOM methods for manipulating the DOM elements. Few of them are like say get element by ID, get element by class name, and so on. Let me give a demo of this. So for giving this demo, I'll just going to have a button. So this is the button element, which will have the text as change content. On this button element, I'm basically associating a once a click happens on this. So that is using on click attribute. So I want to call change content JavaScript code. That JavaScript code I defined inside a script tag. Here I'm uncommenting this. So this is the JavaScript code. Here I defined just a simple one-line function. So note that this change content and this change content. Basically here I'm calling this function. So in this function, what I do is document is a actually this is what is the variable which represents our DOM, document object model. So on this document object model, I call get element by ID, and here I give an ID, which this ID is same as this para is basically value of this ID attribute of this paragraph element. So when I do get element by ID and para, I get this element. On this element, I want to change this the content which is there inside this HTML tag. So that this content what I marked now here, that you can access using inner.html. So that inner.html, so if you want to change this text to some other text, here I'm giving the new text. By clicking on it, you are going to change the content of that element. Let's have a look at it. See here, this is a button, change content. And you see here, see the text in the blue rectangle is welcome to HTML5, CSS3 and JavaScript. Now I'm going to click on this change content button. You see the content will change. Now it is welcome to all the participants of Edureka's webinar. So let me just show you once again. See, this is like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I'm clicking on the change content. So this is how you can dynamically change the content which is displayed in the browser. Note that when the content change, there's no flicker at all. So if you do if you reload a new HTML page, then you will see a flicker. But whereas if you manipulate the DOM elements using JavaScript, there will be absolutely no flicker. Yeah, as I said, jQuery is one of the JavaScript libraries. Or you can call it a framework. Basically, jQuery has got different versions like jQuery Core, jQuery UI, and jQuery Mobile. So jQuery UI is mainly basically useful for developing good user interface, whereas jQuery Core is mainly meant for manipulating the DOM. Similarly, jQuery Mobile is for basically using jQuery on the mobile devices like smartphones and tablets. If you want to develop the user interfaces for the mobile devices, then you can use jQuery Mobile. So yeah, you might be wondering, why should you use jQuery? Basically, jQuery clearly separates the HTML and JavaScript of a web page. And if there are any cross-browser incompatibilities, like for example, some functionality works in Chrome browser, but it does not work in IE browser. So any such incompatibilities can be eliminated using jQuery. One of the useful purpose for which jQuery was being used was like calendar. So whenever you have want to input in a date, so you when you click on it, a button or an input field, you would like to have a calendar displayed, and then you can choose a date. So this date functionality was not there in HTML 4.01. But in that case, if you want to display a date, then the most of the developers were depending on jQuery. So using jQuery, you can select the elements, manipulate it, you can modify the style, you can get the different effects and animations and so on. So note that jQuery, all these things, what jQuery does, you can do it in JavaScript, in pure JavaScript yourself. But the thing is, you have to write a few tens of lines or even hundreds of lines. But that might be very efficient. Since jQuery has been developed by professionals, and that will be much faster than your handwritten JavaScript code. Note that jQuery does support parsing of JSON objects, and also it supports Ajax. So using Ajax, you can make calls to the backend server and dynamically update the content of the page without a flicker. So there have been different ways you can include the jQuery. You can you can download from the jQuery website and then include it, serve it from your web server. Or there have been different CDN servers like Google's, Microsoft, and Mac CDNs. You can point them to those jQuery, yeah, minified version of those jQuery libraries. Yeah, let's look at AngularJS. AngularJS is also a JavaScript framework. This is actually AngularJS in the recent times is getting a lot of popularity. One good thing is it's got a solid foundation led by Google, because it's Google um, uses AngularJS in their products. AngularJS, note that until AngularJS came, um, the model view controller pattern, MVC pattern, was available only in the backend side, like in PHP, and so PHP or even Python. But unfortunately, the same MVC pattern could not be applied for a front-end web development until AngularJS came. So, so in AngularJS, you have the basically the model, so as object properties, and basically you have the view which you can display the in the page DOM. Uh, there is some concept called data binding. Using data binding, you can basically connect or tie the model with the view. Whenever model changes, view will get automatically updated. So to do this manipulation on the model, so you can write AngularJS controllers that basically manages the relationship between the model and the view. So let me give a quick demo of AngularJS application. Yeah. So here is I written a simple uh, a billing counter application for a supermarket. So you know that in supermarket when you go, so whenever customer buys the different items, so you would like to the person at the counter that scans the barcode, and you'll see that how many items you purchased, and then the billing will happen depending upon how many items you purchased. So here is an application. So here you see that in the item description, I'm giving this a pen. So I want 10 pens. So now I'm clicking on so add item, and then I want pencils. So I want 20. So using tab, I went to this add item. I'm pressing return. Go to it, and then eraser. I want 30 erasers, and I'm clicking on add item. Let's say if you want to remove any item, you can click on it that got removed. You can say notebook. I don't know if it's there. 5. Yeah, it's there. Notebook. So note that so this is the unit price of the pen, and there are 10 quantities which I purchased, 10 pens I purchased, and 10 into 10 which is 100. Note that this multiplication with the unit price and the quantity is done automatically. And finally, for all the items, $100, $90, and $50, it's a subtotal $240. So now you can have provide another button where you can print onto a printer. And finally, when you say print, it can do two things. One is it can send a backend server that what are the items purchased and how many quantities and what is the bill amount. And so that from the backend web server can basically reduce these quantities from the stored stock, and then finally it can basically write a record into the sales that okay, $240 has been purchased and the bill amount, so that it can be counted as it can be used for the accounting purposes for revenue calculation. Finally, it gets printed on the printer. So this is a simple AngularJS application. Here is the code. So this is the code, and this is the double curly braces is the AngularJS expressions. And here I have single line code that defines AngularJS module, and I have some controller which defines basically the adding and deleting of items and computing of the bill. Note that this all is a JavaScript, and then I can style it using CSS, the whole bill. Like for example, here you see uh, the black lines, the blue text, and so on. So the like say grand total is all in thick blue line. All this styling is done using CSS. Yeah, there are other advanced web programming topics like HTML, Canvas, WebGL, and SVG, and you need these for basically for displaying and rendering the graphics in the web page. And using geolocation API, you can get them the physical location where the user is logged in to the internet. So that location you can get using geolocation API, and you can even display the Google Maps as well. And there's a drag and drop API. For drag and drop, earlier web developers were depending on uh, frameworks like D&D frameworks and jQueries. Now you don't require that because drag and drop API is natively supported by HTML5 browsers. And earlier, for storing any information, it was there. Cookies were used for transferring the state from client to server and back. So now you don't have to depend on cookies. You can use them in web storage APIs. In web storage, there is a local storage and session storage. Session storage gets cleared for every session, whereas local storage will lost even across the invocations of web browsers. And there's a new topics like web workers, wherein you can write JavaScript code in a multi-threaded environment, and not multi-threaded environment. So you can basically write code which gets executed in multiple threads. So server sent events is another concept wherein um, the server will send the updates to the client whenever it's available. So this is see, most of the time the client pulls the information from the server. So that is pull technology. Whereas using server sent events, it's a the push technology where server sends the information. One good example is like whenever there's a like stock code price of a stock changes, so that price update should be sent from the server stock exchange server to the end users. So that information, only if there is a change, it should be pushed. So that is one application where the server sends events can be used. So here is a demand for the full stack web developer. You can see since 2006 the demand for the web developers is increasing. In the last few months, it's really shooted up. So the front-end web development course of Edureka will be having 10 modules, and in 2 modules I'll be covering HTML. In another 2 modules I'll be covering CSS and CSS3. In 2 modules I'll be covering HTML5 specific, and 2 modules JavaScript. In the module 9 I'll be briefly touching upon jQuery and AngularJS. In the module 10, what are the advanced topics which I explained in the previous slide. So I'll be touching them briefly, so that you can start using them. So what's a three click rule? So probably you are referring to I'm just guessing. I don't know whether you are referring to the same. 3-click rule means probably from the main page, you should be able to reach. The user should be able to do whatever he would like to do. So probably within 3 clicks. That could be what you mean by 3-click rule. Means you should not expect the user to click more than 3 clicks to get to what he or she wants. That could be the one. Yeah, Arman asked a question. Web designer has nothing to do with the programming. Yes, you are right. The strictly speaking, web designer has nothing to do with the programming of the web. So, but nowadays, if a web designer has got the programming skills, then it's an added advantage. Similarly, if web programmer has got some designing skills, then it's a again added advantage. So nowadays, in the recent times, you cannot just limit yourself to just web designing or web programming. So you have to basically have some appreciation for the other skill, that is designing or programming. You said Ramesh, you said jQuery also. I didn't get your question. Can you just type it in clearly, Ramesh? Yeah, Jagrut asked a question: how to design best UX design web application? Yeah, Jagrut, that's a very tough question because see, one aspect is UI, which is user interface. Now, what you're asking is a user experience. The best user experience will come only, I would say, with lot of experience and then the studying the behavior of the users. I think user experience is it's more than science. It is, I would say, it's art. Okay, so definitely, the one way to design a best user experience web application is that you need to study the how web development used to happen before, and what are the different ways people are. You need to study different websites on the web, so which are easy to use. and then see that what is that common factor which is coming out of all these the well-designed websites, easy to use websites. So some of those principles, if you adopt them in developing your application, I think yeah, you'll be somewhat close to having a best user experience web application. Yeah, Amal, you sent some question marks. I didn't understand. You can just type in your query. Kamlesh has asked a question. Say connection lost, so I joined the webinar 15 minutes late. If you have time, please give a quick recap. Sorry, Kamlesh. I mean, I'll not be able to do the quick recap. Anyway, this webinar has been recorded. You can just contact Edureka support, and they'll be able to share the link where you can watch this recorded webinar. Hope that should be fine. Yeah, Manan asked a question. What is the difference between web server and application server? Yeah, Manan, see, the web server will generally serve the static content. Sometimes it may serve the dynamic content as well, but that programming will be done using, as I said, the backend scripting languages like Perl, Python, PHP, Ruby, and so on. So, but using these scripting languages, I mean, you will not be able to get very rich looking, very flexible, yeah, dynamic pages. So that is when, I mean, if you need more complex logic on the backend side, which actually generates the dynamic web page, then you may have to rely on more like what you call general purpose programming language like Java. So when you write the code, backend code in Java, so Java needs to run on Java virtual machine, right? So so now this virtual machine encapsulation is done by what is called application container. So that application container will be running on a application server like sorry, Apache Tomcat or IBM WebSphere. Basically, you can assume that applications server as a container to run this Java programs, which actually generate the same output as um, any web server, which actually should spit it out the HTML, CSS, JavaScript code, so that that is transported on HTTP to the front end web browser, so, to the user, and so that it gets rendered to the visitor of the website. So that's a brief difference between application server and web server. And one more difference is web server generally runs on port 80 or 8080, whereas application server basically it can listen on multiple ports. Yeah, say Kiran Mai asked one question: is li tag indicates list? It does not list, but basically it's a list item. List item is li. So Nihal, my net connection is not working properly. Okay, fine. Can I get the session afterwards? Yes, Nihal, you can get the web recording of this webinar. You can contact Edureka support. Next, Ishan Chawla, why there are so many frameworks based on JavaScript? That's a good question. See, the Java base JavaScript is like has got the power like any other general purpose programming language like C++, Java. But as you know, web developer need to develop website um, fast. So if the web developer start writing the code using JavaScript, obviously it will take longer time. The first thing. Second thing is, since if the web developer starts writing the code from the scratch, there's a good chance that there'll be the bugs in the code. To avoid this, basically the bugs, and also to reduce the development time, people depend on frameworks. And since JavaScript is actually using JavaScript, you can get a lot of dynamic interactions on the web page, and people have come up with for different purpose, different use cases. They developed the frameworks using JavaScript. So, so once you understand how the framework works, you can take advantage of the frameworks and get the good effects on the web page and for good functionality. Like for example, using AngularJS, I wrote a billing application quite fast. So same thing if you have to develop using writing your own Java code, probably it would have taken close to 300 to 500 lines. But here my code is not more than here. How many lines of code is this? My Java code is JavaScript code is only 50 lines. So where is 50 lines? Like where is probably 500 lines? Almost you get 10 times more productivity. And also this code easy to write, the control code, and it's almost, so if there are any bugs, you can fix them quickly. Note that fixing bugs in 50 lines of JavaScript is much easier compared to 500 lines JavaScript code. Hope Ishan, that answers your question. So Rahul asked a question: can I build a website only using HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript? The answer is, Rahul, yes. You can build a website using HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. Only it's a this limited, I would say, dynamic website. So when you said only, does it mean that you don't have even web server? So obviously you need some web server to serve this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript content, right? So if you don't have web server, then it will be like the way I am demonstrating this demo code. It will be on the local machine, only you can see it. If you want it to be visible to the any user on the internet, then you have to host it on a web server. If you ask a question like, yes, do I need to use any other CSS3 JavaScript frameworks? Yeah, if you are comfortable, and then you can write, if you're confident to write uh, code without depending on the frameworks, go ahead, do it. It's quite possible. But only thing is your development time might take a little longer. If you ask like a question like, so can I develop a dynamic website using only these three? Yeah, so using Ajax in JavaScript, you can have some direct interaction with the backend web server and dynamically so update the front end page, but that is somewhat limited compared to what you can get by doing a scripting on the server side. Hope that answered your question. Ishan asked another question. Also, I would like to know Google Polymer good enough to use on web apps. Yeah, Polymer, yes, it is another Java framework which is supported by Google. So yeah, it's I would say it's one of the good frameworks as well. But probably this as part of the front end web development course, will not be covering this. But probably I can give some pointers on that. Amal, so Arman asked a question: what is the use of Ruby on Rails? Yeah, Arman, basically Ruby is another programming language on the backend side, like PHP, Perl, and Python. The Ruby on Rails is actually web application framework, which will help you to develop a backend web application using Ruby language as a scripting language. So Choto asked a question: what is Ajax and its use? So Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So using Ajax, you can make asynchronous calls to the backend web server and get the information from the backend server and display it in the web browser. So that's what is Ajax. So for any asynchronous communication and for dynamic updation of the web page, you need Ajax. Hope Chotu that answered your question. Fishing comes under web development. The fishing actually it's a I would say it is a web development as well, but it is a web development done with a bad intent. Bad intent is to trick the visitor of the website, and so that you can uh, the purpose of the phishing website is to steal some information from the user. It could be passwords, or it could be like say bank, it could be like finance like bank sites passwords or any other information. um, so that's the main purpose of phishing. Yeah, it's a basically web development but for the bad purpose. So Sachin asked a question: is it difficult? It's difficult for me to understand arrays. Um, I think yeah, Sachin, that needs some little bit of I would say tutoring to make you understand arrays. Mm, Probably, I think you might have to take someone help who is familiar with programming. Ask them to teach what the concept of arrays is. And in the course, I do teach concept of arrays. So web developer is paid equally to the programmers. Um, to answer your question, I would say yes. I think there could be a slight difference. I would say not more than plus or minus 10%. But I would say nowadays some web developers are more in demand compared to the plain programmers like C++, Java programmers. The reason being, most of the development in future is going to happen mainly on the web. When I said, uh, the most of the development is, see, earlier web development was minimal, and comparatively the standard programming, the web, what do you call, software development was huge. But now, to note that the number of software development projects are, they remain more or less same, or it might have increased a little bit. But with respect to that, if you compare the amount of web development projects, they're huge. At least in my guess, at least it is like anywhere between 3 to 4 times more than the regular software development. So at least 3 to 5 times more is happening on the web development side. So just take a case of like Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. So all these are the basically the companies who do a lot of web programming. So that itself speaks volumes. So Janardhan asked a question: could you explain the difference between JS and AngularJS? Janardhan, sometime back I did explain difference between JS and AngularJS. Priyam also asked the same question. Priyam, I answered. So what AngularJS, and I give a demo as well. Um, so what is use of Ruby on Rails? Arman asked. Arman, I answered sometime back. Basically, Ruby on Rails is a web application framework for developing backend, for developing writing the code, the backend server side. So using Ruby language. Is there any web framework for CSS like JavaScript, AngularJS? Yes. Like see, there are many frameworks based on JavaScript. Like jQuery and AngularJS is quite popular. Even there are many D3JS and many. Actually, at least there'll be anywhere between 20 plus, even more. Even there could be even, no wonder if it is even 100 frameworks which are based on JavaScript. For CSS, yes, there are frameworks. Um, the popular frameworks for CSS are like Bootstrap, and there's a framework called Sass, and there's another framework called Less. What are the components you cover in this course? Sandeep, you can go to Edureka, www.edureka.co, and search for HTML5. There, you'll get the link and there you can look at the course curriculum. So all the topics what is mentioned in the curriculum, what I cover in the course. What are the best languages in designing e-commerce website? So when you said e-commerce website, you said that it's a web-based, it's based on the web, right? If it is based on the web, the only languages on the front end side, see ultimately the purpose of any web server is to serve the HTML, CSS, JavaScript so that it gets rendered in the web browser. Note that web browser understands only these three: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And the backend side coding, so you can use, I mean, whatever the scripting language you're comfortable with, like PHP, Python, Perl, and so on, Ruby. But let's say there are even some website like Shopify where if you subscribe to that, there they provide the templates for quickly developing the e-commerce websites. Hope Hare Krishna that answers your question. But note that Shopify like website, they have a standard framework and you have to fit in your website into their framework. But if you want to do something differently, then you have to do the coding yourself. That's when the skills in front end back end development are helpful. Janardhan asked a question, can you explain the difference between JS and AngularJS? Could you explain about the difference between, yeah, Janardhan, I did answer this question sometime back. Bharadwaj asked question, is caching only the way to improve the performance of a web application? Are there any methods we can speed up the execution of response time if the load is high? Bharadwaj, that is very complex question to answer in this webinar, because I mean, for improving the performance, caching is one of the aspect, but caching alone will not solve the problem. So on the backend side, you are say depending upon how much load you have on one server, so you have to do the load balancing, and then probably you need to have very high speed servers, and you need to write the backend, the basically the code which generates this spits out this HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It should be fast enough. Otherwise, another method is, rather than sending HTML, CSS, JavaScript every time and doing the page reload, what you can do is, I mean, only you can dynamically update the page by making Ajax call. That's one way. Another way is, I mean, the whole HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can optimize it. That's another way. And front end side, when you write the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, make sure that the number of times you make HTTP request to the server, they're as minimum as possible. So let's say if you're making, let's say 100 requests, obviously your site will be slower. Try to limit the number of requests to the backend server anywhere between 3 to 10 or maximum 20. So then I would say not more than 10 is a good thumb rule. You should not make, but if you have a lot of images, probably you can still go ahead and make another 10 requests and then limit yourself to 20, not more than that. If you're making more than 20 calls to the backend server for any resource means it could be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, any image. Okay, each one goes as a request. All of them put together should be less than 10 or 20. Satyam says, I am a newbie. Please tell me where to start. So for web development, the place to start is this course, Satyam. So Vanita, she said, thank you. Thank you very much, Vanita, for your appreciation. Arman, what is the use of Ruby Rails? Arman, I did answer that question before. Hare Krishna asked a question, what is the difference between Oracle and MySQL databases? That's a very complex question. See, basically Oracle and MySQL both are the relational databases at the bottom. And so when I said relational, I mean, you can use both of them for transaction-oriented applications. And MySQL is a freely available, and Oracle was a commercial application. But a few years back, Oracle acquired even MySQL as well. So MySQL, there is the offshoot of MySQL, which is MariaDB. So Parmesh asked a question: difference between jQuery and AngularJS. So jQuery is mainly used for the user interface and manipulating the DOM elements, depending on whether using jQuery core or jQuery UI or jQuery. jQuery core is only for manipulating the DOM elements. jQuery UI is to get the animation of the UI elements. jQuery mobile is a lightweight jQuery on mobile devices, whereas AngularJS is for the single page applications, like I demonstrated sometime back, that the billing counter application. So another application like Google Docs or Google Drive. All these are basically, when I said single page means, see, the one page will be served to the user, and all the things what user wants to do will be done in the same page, more or less. So that is a single page application. For AngularJS is for single page applications. How to plan a web project? I think Chotu, that's a very big question. Um, yeah, how to plan means basically you need to have people who got the front end and web development and back end web development skills, and you need to have server to host, and yeah, and then you need to have what is the project you would like to develop, and have your team develop it. And Priyam asked a question: what about database if use only HTML, CSS, JavaScript? Priyam, I didn't get your question correctly. Probably you can retype the question and rephrase it. So if your question is like, do you need to learn database? Uh, if that is what is your question, yes. So as HTML, CSS, JavaScript is only for the front end development. But for doing a backend development, let's say for persisting some data, you need to have skills about the database as well. The backend database could be MySQL, or could be any NoSQL databases, or it could be even Oracle like database as well. Hamid asked a question like, what about phishing act? How can we control? Yeah, phishing, definitely you cannot control it, but only thing is, user who is clicking on that link should be careful not to click. So yeah, there, I don't think there's any other way. There are few things which browsers, like for example, there's something called uh, course is one technique, and there's a XXX. So these are few techniques which will help you to basically mitigate the risks of phishing. Priyam asked question, yeah, what about database if I use only HTML, CSS, JavaScript? Probably you can rephrase the question. Chotu asked question, the importance of session in a web development. Session means basically the connection between front end and the backend web server. Sorry, front end web browser and backend web server. So that connection. So, like for example, when you open a website in a tab in a browser and you close it. So from the time you open it and the time you close it, that's what is basically session. Priyam, database connection, please. Okay, I didn't get your question, Priyam. You can ask the question again. Balram, are there any courses to start for the basics of server? Uh, Basics of the server probably may be covered in the course on the backend web development. So what is ASP.NET framework? Um, Ashish, see, I'm not an expert at ASP.NET, but what I think is basically, um, see, ASP is a language like PHP, so which is used to do the backend scripting, and the .NET is the framework. I would say it's a basically a framework which provided by the Microsoft, in which you can write the the backend development, somewhat similar to, I would say, you see basically ASP.NET, you can host it on Microsoft Internet IaaS servers. Basically, uh, a framework using which you can do the backend scripting on Microsoft web server, which is IaaS server. Um, yeah, generally since there are the two things. One is ASP.NET, which is supported by the big company like Microsoft. There are other like open source movement where you have Apache Tomcat, PHP, and other frameworks. So note that open source framework, I mean, though it has got a big community, the support, if there are any bugs, the support is you may get it, you may not get it. Whereas if you use ASP.NET, since you buy the licenses from Microsoft, the support is guaranteed. If there are any bugs, the Microsoft will respond to you, make sure that okay, those bugs are fixed in a fixed time frame. So that's why generally enterprise go for ASP.NET because it has got a good support by a big company. Okay, and yeah, I answered the Ashish's question on ASP.NET framework. The next question is Amal. For designing a web page from scratch will take a lot of time. How to work on a pre-prepared web pages in? I answered that question, Amal. Amal, I repeated that question many times. Hmm. The next question is Priyam. That is also repeated. Same you. A difference between core Java and advanced Java and JavaScript. See the core Java. I don't know about advanced Java. Probably it will talk about the different Java frameworks which are available, um, um, and probably advanced features of Java. The core Java is the basically the core programming language, Java programming language, whereas JavaScript is quite different from Java. See, Java you can develop standalone application or web application if you're running an application web server. Whereas JavaScript is the programming language purely meant for front-end development. Of course, if you recently if you run the Node.js server, then you can write the using JavaScript you can write backend code as well. Hope Priyam that answered your question. And Priyam asked one more question. No, Balram asked a question: How to start a career in server technologies like Microsoft Server 2012? I think the way it is either one thing is you can learn your own, otherwise you have to do some course on Microsoft Server 2012. Prima asked question: What is the scope of web application? See, scope of web application is almost like I would say unlimited. It all depends. Like it's like as generic as I mean, what all programming you can do using generic programming language like C++ or Java. So you cannot write any application. So yeah, scope of a web application is like unlimited. So it's only limited to anything I mean, you can think of which you can do in a standalone application. Almost 90% of them you can do using web applications, except that low-level stuff like manipulating the bits and bytes. Hope Priyam that answered your question. So CSS you will link it with link element. JavaScript you link using script attribute. Sorry, script element. Um, what type of work a web developer does in a company? So basically, a web developer does the development of a web page or website or web application. So web developer has to be conversant in at least either front-end technologies or back-end technologies. So, or if you have a mix of both the skills, then it's added advantage. So your value in a company will go up because you know both front end and you understand front end development and back end web development. So the work involves basically if you're doing front end web development, writing the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code, or if you're doing a backend, then writing the backend scripts and hosting it on uh, a web server or a web application server like a Tomcat, and then designing the tables in the backend database like MySQL and interacting it. So the backend scripting code should interact with the backend database, pull out the information, dynamically generate the web pages which are in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and send it to the web browser. So Chotu said, thank you for giving the idea of web development. You're welcome, Chotu. Yeah, difference between sessions and cookies. Basically, cookies are used for storing the some state information for that session. So cookies are basically created on the server side and it's sent to the client side, so that from next time onwards, the web browser should send that cookie to identify who you are, whether you've been authenticated or not. So and as and when a cookie is presented to the backend website, web server side, web server will check whether the cookie is a valid cookie or invalid. If it is valid, it'll take a next action. If it is invalid, it'll say that okay, it'll say that okay, you are not authorized to view the site, and it could be any of those server side errors. Sachin said, thank you very much, sir. I known so many things today. Hope you will help me in the way to improve our knowledge. Yes, you're welcome, Sachin. Chotu said how to connect a web page on a server. Basically, you don't connect a web page on a server. You need to host a web page, a set of web pages on a web server, and end users they give the domain name. Like for example, www.google.com or www.ibm.com. They give a website name, that domain name, and once they enter the domain name, so basically by default it will serve index.html and index.php, and that's how basically you enter into a website. Once you get the first page, from there you can navigate deeper into the web page hosted on that web server. Okay, next Avinash asked a question, how do you categorize the frameworks like WordPress? I would say WordPress is not a framework. WordPress is more a tool for you to quickly develop a website. Frameworks, you see, using frameworks, you can develop the website the way you want. Whereas WordPress, you can develop website only in particular way, and you cannot have a very complex application developed using WordPress. Whereas with using frameworks, you can develop complex web applications. Hope Avinash that answers your question. Yeah, you're welcome, Avinash. Chotu asked one more question: how to make mobile web page and which type of course available? See, for Chotu, for doing a web development for a mobile devices, still you need to be familiar with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But you need to have additional thing what is called, there's something called responsive web design, so that when you develop a web page, it should work for both, say for a smartphone which has got small screen, tablet which has got a bigger screen, and a desktop which has got even the even bigger screen. So when you write a same web page and it should work on all the three devices, that's when your responsive web design will come in handy. And you need to use one technique called styling, called there's something called media queries. You need to use the media queries also to basically display the website depending upon what device it's being viewed. And also, of course, when you can use there is many frameworks like Sencha, Touch2, and there are many frameworks for developing the websites for mobile devices. You can use them as well. So Priyam asked a question, talk about one language nowadays which if more demanding. Um, See, nowadays I would say, um, see, compared to C++, definitely Java is in more demand. And of course, Java and ASP.NET, they are almost more or less, I would say 60-40, yeah, demand. Because Java like language mainly um, adopted by the what do you call companies who believe in open source software, whereas ASP.NET mainly by the enterprise development. And obviously, whenever you do any web development, you need to definitely be conversant with front-end web development and back-end web development. I think that nowadays overall, I would say web developers have got more demand compared to um, yeah, other programmers. At least in the future, the things will slowly change towards web development. Um, Chotu asked a question, how to make an education website. See, education website, when you said the education, it depends on what content you want to host it on a educational website. Most probably, see, you'd like to see when you said education website, you need to have audio and video content. So, which wherein the HTML5 will be quite handy because it's got audio and video tags, and you need to have some interaction. Definitely, you can do that using JavaScript. You need to do the animation. So then you need even um, basically you need to use some JavaScript like framework, JavaScript frameworks to do the animations on the website. So, so I reached the end of all the questions asked by the participants. So thanks a lot. Uh, Thanks everyone. Thanks Shotu. I really appreciate your time joining this webinar. I hope you got some idea about what is web development, both front end and back end. Yeah, if you can register for this course, definitely you'll learn more. Definitely, see, just 1.5 hours is not good enough to teach web development. The front end web development will alone uh, can take, like, see, my course is like 30 hours, 3 hours one session, and 10 session 30 hours. Um, so I think, in my opinion, front end web development alone can take anywhere between 30 hours to 100 hours, depending upon how quickly you can grasp it. Thank you very much. Bye bye. I'll end this webinar here.